rewarded by the Rare Diseases Society of India for her dedication and expertise in this particular specialty by a very coveted award, what is called the Rare Star Award, which was to acknowledge her lifetime contribution. More than this, I know her as a very dedicated soul who carries forward the legacy of her father, who is a teacher of teachers, Dr. M.K. All of you know Dr. M. Krishnaswamy, who was our teacher and has been teacher of our teachers also. And she is carrying forward the torch lit by her father. And more than that, her humility and her empathy with her patients, having taken a path which is untrodden and mostly for the underserved population of Rare Disease of India. She has been doing a commendable job, and our batch as well as Tanjore Medical College should be proud of her and whatever she has done. With this, I invite Dr. Sujata to go on with the presentation. It's a very important topic. She is going to lay the foundation of how to understand genetics today as the introductory talk, and then she has promised to kindly deliver further talks also, maybe 3 4 further talks for us to understand genetics in clinical medicine. Okay, over to Sujata, please.
Thank you very much, Dr. Murli, for a kind introduction, and also Dr. Venkatesh for taking all the efforts in arranging this meeting, and all our seniors and my teachers. I pay my respects to all of you, and without wasting much time, we go on to the today's lecture. I hope my screen is visible.
Not yet, ma'am. Actually, you have to share your screen.
I think I have shared.
Not visible on the screen, madam.
Is it visible?
Can you stop sharing and share once again, madam?
Okay. I think many mics are on. I think if everybody can mute, the disturbance will be less. Okay, so today the topic is basics of genetic principles in disease, and the lecture plan will be like that. I will give an outline of what is genome, and all this is fundamental information. And then I'll teach about chromosomes and what happens if there are any aberrations in the chromosomes. And then I move on to copy number variations. What are they, and what are the disorders they cause? And then the single gene disorders, their inheritance patterns, and a word or introduction about these complex inheritance disorders. What is multifactorial? What is mitochondrial, UPD, imprinting, etc. So our genetic material, if you look at our genetic material, every organ is made up of a large number of cells. And in each human cell, the genome, which contains the genetic code, is housed in the cell nucleus. You can see the cell nucleus. So actually the nucleus size is almost very smaller than even the strand of a human hair. It is so small, and it houses about 2 meters of DNA. And then when you stretch it, you find that it becomes a chromosome. You can see a chromosome. And when you unwind it further, you have the double helix DNA. And inside the double helix DNA, you have the nucleotide bases. And adenine pairs with thymine, and cytosine pairs with guanine. You can remember at center of gravity as a mnemonic. And so this is all inside. This is the genome, which is packed inside the nucleus. So you can compare the genome to a book library. So the whole library represents the whole genome. It contains all the genetic information of an organism. And each of these bookshelves, we can call them as chromosomes, where all the multiple genes are arranged. And the books represent the DNA across the genome. And the individual page of each book represents a gene. And the words written in them are the chemical bases or the nucleotide bases, ATCG. So this is the genetic language. And when you see 99.8% of the genome is shared among all human beings. So there is very little difference between one human to the other. And how this genomic library is put to use? Each cell has this whole library. And special types of cell like white blood cell or neurons, they open up only few of these books which are relevant to their function. And if a book is misplaced or it is missing in this cellular library, it leads to missing or unnecessary information. So that leads to developmental and inherited disorders. So this principle is also useful in establishing diagnostics and also therapies for these disorders. So now we look at chromosomes. Chromosome, the DNA molecule is actually packaged into a thread-like structure, and that is called the chromosome. Human cells contain 46 chromosomes arranged in 23 pairs. So this is what is called, on the left side, what is is the ideogram. How should each chromosome look after staining? And then on the right, you see the actual chromosomes, stained chromosomes. And we stain these chromosomes with what is called gene star staining. And you can see the dark and light bands. And based on the appearance and the presence of centromere, these are all arranged into these pairs. So from pair 1 to pair 23. So these 22 pairs are called autosomes, and they have the genes which are responsible for the function and structure of the body. And these two last pair is called the sex chromosomes. As we all know, XX is for female and XY is for male. And these chromosomes can be seen under the microscope. And a karyotype can pick up problems which are about 5 to 10 megabases or larger than that. So how do they write the chromosomal report? How do they find out if there is a problem in some location here? How do they write it? So there are different terminologies of how we write the nomenclature of a chromosomal aberration. So after genes are staining, we can see the arm of the chromosome. So the short arm is called the P arm and the long arm is called the Q arm. And then we divide the chromosomes into regions, bands, and each band has a subband. So if I want to say on chromosome 17, I find a problem here in this locus. I say that there is 17 Q arm and the region 1, band 1, and in subband 2.2, there is a problem. So this is how we will be able to narrate where the problem is. So when you see a karyotype report, this is what it means. So you can, when you read a report, you will be able to understand now when you see a karyotype report. A word about the cell division, because this is very important to fundamentally understand what types of cell division happens in human body. In the somatic cells, we have mitosis. And as we all know, diploid means the pair of chromosomes which we saw. That's called diploid status. And after division, between the parent cell and the daughter cell or the offspring cell, I have written here, because daughter, son, people should not get confused. We usually use the term daughter cell, but for daughter and son, it is the same. So I put the offspring cell here. It's a new terminology which I have used to avoid confusion. So the parent cell and the cell after division, they all have the same number of chromosomes after mitotic division. And this happens in all the tissues of the body. Whereas in germ cells, we have the meiotic division, where the parent cell and the offspring cell, they will have half of the number of the genetic material. So if it is diploid, that is 46 chromosomes in the parent cell. After a meiotic division, you have only 23 chromosomes, because the sperm should have 23 and the ovum should have 23. And when they fuse, they give back the 46 chromosome numbers to the embryo. So what are the types of chromosomal abnormalities? So chromosome abnormalities can be numerical, where there can be error in the number, or there can be error in the structure of the chromosome. Both have different implications. So how do numerical abnormalities of chromosome happen? There is a mechanism called non-disjunction. So that means failure of separation of the parental cell chromosomes equally into the daughter cells. So there are three forms of non-disjunction. There can be failure to separate the homologous chromosomes to separate in meiosis 1, or the sister chromatids may fail to separate in meiosis 2, or even during mitosis, the sister chromatids may fail to separate. So these are all three mechanisms of non-disjunction. So you can see here, this is a normal cell. See, maybe you can assume this is one partner's chromosome dividing into the gamete. So maybe this is the wife. And in meiosis 1, the homologous chromosomes separate. So the diploid becomes haploid. And then the sister chromatids break into one. Each cell that has only one chromatid. So this also breaks further. And this is happening in meiosis 2. Whereas here, you can see the non-disjunction in meiosis 1. So both chromosomes have gone into this cell, and this cell is left without any chromosome. So what happens? These both chromatids are going into the gametes. So these are called disomic gametes because instead of having one chromatid, they are having both sister chromatids. And here you can see there is an error in the meiosis 2. So here there is a proper separation, but further down when the sister chromatids have to break, they have not broken and separated and they have gone into one cell. So there is a nullisomic means there is nothing, no genetic material is called nullisomic, and disomic means they are having two chromatids instead of having one. So when there is a fusion, for example, this is the oocyte and this is the sperm. So when a disomic gamete fuses with the monosomic gamete, you get what is called trisomy. Instead of having two chromatids, the embryo will have three. And if there is a nullisomic gamete fusing with the monosomic, you have a monosomy. So the problem in all the cells of the offspring will be seen if there is a meiotic division error. If there is a meiotic division error, that means this error is going directly into the embryo. So instead of the embryo having 46 chromosomes, it will have 47 chromosomes, or if it is a monosomy, it is going to have 45 chromosomes. So these are the examples of numerical errors. Here you can see the extra 21. So all the chromosomes are in pairs, but only the chromosome 21 is 3 in number. That means there is some non-disjunction from one of the parent. And here 221 chromosomes are from one parent and the other parent has given the normal one component. So there are 3 components. Here you can see this is Turner syndrome and this is XO. There is only one sex chromosome and the other one is missing. So that's called X0 or XO. So here there is an allosomic gamete which has come from one parent and one parent has given a single chromatid. So that's why that is XO and this is Turner. So here the chromosome number will be 45 and here the chromosome number will be 47. And here you can see this is Klinefelter syndrome, non-disjunction again with 2 sex chromosomes, and or maybe the father has given both X and Y or the mother has given both X. So we do not know from where the non-disjunction has come. So these are all the numerical aberrations. So this is pertaining to one single chromosome. See, for example, all other chromosomes are normal. Only chromosome 21 is faulty. Here the sex chromosomes are faulty. So this refers to only one chromosome set. Whereas you see here, there is non-disjunction in all the chromosomes. So one parent has sent both the components for all the chromosomes. So this is called triploidy. And sometimes you can have non-disjunction from both the parents where you have four sets of chromosomes in all. So that is called tetraploidy. So these are all lethal abnormalities. So these are the numerical aberrations. So non-disjunction can also happen during mitosis. As I told you, mitosis happens in the somatic cells. It's not in the germ cells. And so mitosis happens after the embryo has formed. So after the embryo has formed, the few cells, there can be non-disjunction during the mitotic division. So there will be few normal cells and few abnormal cells. And this is called a mosaic pattern. So mosaicism happens because of a error in the mitotic division after the embryo has formed. So what is the relevance of chromosomal number problems? The non-disjunction occurs in a set or whole set of chromosomes. As I told you, either it can be trisomy, monosomy, or it can be triploidy, which is called polyploidy, triploidy or tetraploidy. And it is nothing to do with the parental chromosomes. Parents are perfectly normal. This is just an error which happens during the embryogenesis. And so the recurrence is low. It doesn't happen again and again. Whereas now, if you look at the structural chromosomal abnormalities, so this is pertaining to structure of the chromosome. It can be any chromosome from 1 to the sex chromosomes. All the 23 pairs, anything can go faulty. So there can be a deletion in a part of the chromosome. There can be duplication. There can be an insertion of a part of the chromosome here. There can be translocation. That means one part of the chromosome, for example, chromosome 5 has gone to chromosome 7. And from chromosome 7, a bit has come here. So this is called reciprocal translocation. And Robertsonian, one whole chromosome goes and sits on the other chromosome. So these are all called translocations. And there can be inversions and also there can be ring chromosomes. So there can be different problems in the structure of the chromosome. This is entirely different from the numerical aberrations. So this also has different implications. So it can occur de novo. For example, I see a child It can just have a structural chromosomal aberration without any inheritance from the parents, or sometimes the parent can be a balanced carrier. If the parent is a carrier of a translocation or a chromosomal aberration, they are called balanced because they don't have any problem physically, but the offspring can have 10 to 15% chance of having an unbalanced rearrangement, which may lead to recurrent miscarriages. Child can be born with congenital anomaly or dysmorphism, developmental delay, or the parents can have reproductive failures. So we have to do prenatal testing in every pregnancy and give them reproductive choices. So if there is a structural chromosomal abnormality that is being inherited from the parents, then we have to exercise more caution and give them reproductive choices. So this is regarding an overview of the chromosomal problems. I'm just summing up. There can be numerical problems or there can be structural problems in the chromosome. Numerical problems are usually generally non-recurrent and nothing to do with the parents, whereas chromosomal structural aberrations can be from one of the parent and we have to exercise caution. Now I'm showing you a few normal variations. This is small stalk and this is a satellite sitting on the chromosome, and around the centromere, which is called heterochromatin, it can be long or it can be short. These are all normal variations and sometimes they are being suspected as problems, but usually they are all innocuous. So one has to differentiate normal variations from actual structural problems. So these are all called polymorphisms in the chromosomes. So a word about cancer, because we have spoken about somatic cell division. Mostly 90 to 95% of cancers are because of somatic cell division error. So the cell division has to be regulated. So there are molecules which stimulate cell division and there are molecules which inhibit. Like the Bullock cart you see, there is an accelerator and a brake. So both should work in unison at the same speed. The proto-oncogenes, which are accelerators, and the tumor suppressors are the brakes, and they have to be applied at the same time, and then only the cell division is regulated. But if the mutation happens in the accelerator or the brake, then the control is lost, and so there is excessive mitotic division, and that leads to cancer. Sometimes there is a mutation in the DNA repair genes. Only the 5 to 10% of cancers are germline mutations. That means they are hereditary. And this is a separate topic. And today I'm not going to deal about cancer genetics at all because we learned about a little about cell division. I just wanted to give a small overview here. Now we move on to the next topic, which is called the copy number variations or CNV. Because you'll all be hearing a lot about microarray. So what is that? Copy number variations are different DNA segments will have different copies through the genome. So they are normal variations. So many of us will have many copies of a segment of a DNA here and there. It may be 2 copies, 3 copies, 4 copies. So individual variants may be short or can have thousands of bases. So it can be a short stretch to a long stretch. And some they come about through duplication or deletion or other changes. And these variations many times are innocuous, but when they have important genes, they assume significance. And these changes cannot be seen under a microscope because they are very tiny, like from 1000 bases to 5 MB. And so they cannot be seen under the microscope. And this segment, the portion which can be deleted or duplicated, can be large or can be very small. And it can have hundreds or thousands of base pairs. And the microarray is the technique to detect these copy number variations. So these copy number variations can be a normal variation or disease causing based on what are the genes that are situated on these DNA segments. So what causes the copy number variation changes? We have the microdeletion syndromes and the microduplication syndromes. So microdeletion syndromes are very significant because several genes will be there in the microdeletion segment, and we cannot do a regular karyotype to detect these CNVs. It requires specific techniques like a technique called FISH, MLPA, or microarray. Similarly, microduplications are also submicroscopic and they are typically 1 to 3 megabases long and they involve several contiguous genes. So they are important because they are associated with syndromic forms of intellectual disability autism, and developmental delay. So
Full
many
stop.
of the microdeletion syndromes are now associated with intellectual disability, autism, and developmental delay. So we have to be careful in evaluating these problems. So when you look at a karyotype, the banding resolution will be 5 to 10 million base pairs. So if there is any problem which is greater than 5 to 10 million base pairs, you can detect by using a karyotype. Whereas if it is less than 5 million base pairs, you require a higher resolution technique. And so all these microdeletions, duplications require a different technique to be diagnosed. So now this is called reverse genetics. So previously we used to see a child and then make a diagnosis and then confirm it with the genetic diagnosis. But now with the advent of high throughput molecular diagnosis, these microarrays are picking up a lot of microdeletion syndromes. So a lot of novel syndromes are being detected. So when you see a child with a dysmorphism developmental delay and I do a karyotype, I find nothing there. So I think maybe is it a microdeletion or duplication and order microarray. So then there is a problem coming in, which I'm seeing for the first time. So I have no idea what the implications are. And a lot of microdeletions and duplications are being discovered. So more than about 211 microdeletion syndromes and 79 microduplication syndromes are now there. So what happened is this is how they discover. So this is the first paper published for these 7q11.23 microduplication syndrome. So Down syndrome, you all know when you see a Down syndrome child walking into a clinic, you can diagnose it's a Down syndrome, and that is called the diagnosis by Gestalt. That means you have seen a lot of Down syndrome children, you know the phenotype. Just by looking at the child, you can make a diagnosis. But these syndromes are yet not so familiar, and so we have to collate a lot of children and then see what are the commonalities in the dysmorphism and then develop a protocol to diagnose by Gestalt. So these are all new syndromes that are coming in, and this is called reverse genetics, where you do the diagnosis first and then correlate it with the phenotype later, because they are all new information which is coming in. So chromosome analysis, what you do, you examine the genome visually, whereas in microarray, you do a comparative genome analysis. So when you compare the genome to a normal genome, you see where all there is increase or where all there is decrease. When there is increase, you know there is duplication. When there is decrease, you know there is a deletion. So this is a comparative analysis. And there are different resolutions for microarray. So depending on where you keep the probe on the genome. So when you do the comparative probes like this is called a 315K array. When the probes are far apart, the resolution is less. Whereas when you keep the probes very closely, the resolution becomes more. And nowadays we do a NGS, that is next generation sequencing microarrays, where the whole genome can be sequenced for CNVs. So micro CNVs or these micro duplications or deletions cannot be seen under the microscope. They require techniques like FISH, MLPA, or microarray. FISH is chromosome specific. If you know the microdeletion syndrome, for example, there is Williams syndrome, or there is conotruncal anomaly and you have the Dijot syndrome, you have made a diagnosis clinically and you know you want to rule out only this microdeletion. There are specific probes called FISH probes. You can put that probe alone and then make a diagnosis. And if you don't have a specific diagnosis, MLPA is a technique where they can study about the common or around 20 microdeletion syndromes can be picked up in one go. If you don't know a diagnosis, you do microarray, where depending upon the resolution, if it is a product of conception, we use lower resolution microarray, whereas if you have a dysmorphic child, you use high resolution microarrays. So this is a microdeletion FISH. So this is a microdeletion in chromosome 7, which causes a syndrome called Williams syndrome. And here you have the control probe and the elastin gene probe. So this is the control probe. And when there is a problem, you don't get signals. So that is the way you diagnose. So there should be signal both in the elastin gene and the control probe. So if you don't have you can see only the control probe here, but the elastin probe is not getting any fluorescence. That means it is positive for Williams syndrome. So only one microdeletion you can pick up using this FISH. So this is a next generation sequencing for CNVs, and the result says pathogenic copy gain of chromosome 15q11.2 to q13.1. So there is a gain. That means there is a duplication in this segment, and you can see the classification whether it is pathogenic or variant of unknown significance. What is the base pair length? What is the cytoband? And what are the genes that are there? Look at the number. There are about 150 genes in this microduplications. So it can cause, what can it cause? It can cause autism, intellectual disability, blah, 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 so many things. So this is how microdeletion is interpreted. So you have to see whether it is pathogenic or a variant of unknown significance, what is the region, what are the genes involved, and what are the clinical implications to make a decision. So some microdeletions are variants of unknown significance where we cannot attribute any significance. So that's why a phenotype genotype correlation is always important whenever you have a genetic report with you. Now, this is all about copy number variations. Now we move on to gene level disorders. So what is single gene disorder? It is actually a spelling mistake in the genetic code. So as I told you, you recollect the library slide which we saw. There is a book with genetic language written, and that if there is a spelling mistake in that genetic language, that is called a mutation. So if you spell enough, ENUF is not equivalent to enough. So this both don't mean the same, though they sound the same. So what is the gene? Gene is a DNA segment, and actually they are made up of these letters. So the letters are actually 3-letter words. So these are all called codons. The genetic language, all the words are 3-lettered and they are called codons. And a lot of these codons make up a gene. And these genes are responsible for making proteins. And all the organs are made up of proteins. And many genes are involved in protein synthesis. For example, if you take a chromosome here, there is a locus here which has a gene which is responsible for the color of the eye. Whereas in the same chromosome, there is a gene which is responsible for the color of the hair. So like that, there are many genes for all the body structure and functions. So typically, this is a very, very simplified diagram of a gene for you to understand. This is called a 5' end and 3' end. And you have exons where you will have the active genes. And introns usually have non-coding regions, usually. But then there are some intronic mutations which can cause disease. But for our understanding, exons are the areas where there are disease-coding genes. Introns are the in-between areas between the coding regions. So here I have put up a picture of the dystrophin gene, which is the largest gene of the human body. If you see the number of exons, there are 79 exons in the DMD gene. Whereas here you can see the thalassemia gene, and this has only 3 exons. So there are only 3 exons in thalassemia gene, and there are 79 exons in the DMD gene. So each gene will vary in size and the number of exons. So the technique you use to diagnose these problems also can be quite different. And when you look at the working of the genome, the DNA has to replicate. And then there is a process called transcription, where the DNA message from the nucleus has to go to the RNA, and the RNA takes the information to the Golgi apparatus and the ribosomes for protein synthesis. So there is transcription, then there is translation, and the DNA wear and tear and repair. So all these processes are happening 24/7, and errors can happen in all the above processes that can lead to no protein formation or a mistakenly formed protein, or there can be big blunders. So these are all the genetic disorders. So what is a mutation and what is a polymorphism? A mutation is a permanent alteration in the nucleotide sequence of an organism, and they are disease causing. For example, your thalassemia, sickle cell anemia, any genetic disorder, there is an error in the gene which has happened and the protein formation has got disrupted. Whereas in polymorphism, it is a genetic variant and that is found profusely in the population, and they are not disease causing. They are just variants. They are not disease causing. For example, your ABO blood group and all those things, they are all variants. There are changes in the genes, but they are not disease causing. They are called polymorphisms. So when you see the point mutations, so I told you the genetic language is only 3-lettered. So for example, these are all the amino acids which are coded by these codons. And here arginine, this is the spelling for arginine, this is the spelling for tryptophan, like that. So we won't go into all these details. So this is the start codon and this is the stop codon. So one cat ate its rat. So this is how the message should be transmitted. If it is a missense mutation, then there is a spelling error. One hat ate its rat. So this is called a missense mutation. There is only one letter which has been altered. Whereas here, a stop codon which has to come in the end has come in between. So what has happened? One cat end, its rat end. So this is called a nonsense mutation and there won't be any protein formed. So a nonsense mutation will be more severe than a missense mutation. The effect of a missense mutation usually is less severe than a nonsense mutation because here some protein at least will be formed, here nothing will be formed. And this is called a frame shift mutation where the triplet codon, here there is an introduction. For example, this is a word which has to read as cat, but a T has been introduced here. So what happens? It is only a 3-letter codon. So because the T has been introduced, it becomes TCA, and so the T of the cat has gone to the next word. So the frame has shifted. So this will never lead to any protein production. So this is called a frame shift mutation. So like that, there are many alterations in the genetic language, and so the resultant protein is never formed properly, and these are all called mutations. So I just put an example of how the message after mutation can get altered. If you read the sentence, a woman without her man is nothing. That means the man is very important. But after a mutation, it can read a woman without her man is nothing. So the genetic language can make lot of alterations in the final effect on the protein. So just to highlight the importance of how the meaning is conveyed, I had taken this example. So now where are these genes? They are located on all the chromosomes. For example, if you look at chromosome 5, there are about 181 million base pairs. Whereas in chromosome 21, which is a very small chromosome, there are 46 million base pairs. So many genes are located along the chromosomes. So what are the modes of inheritance? So it can be autosomal dominant or autosomal recessive. So genes located on chromosomes 1 to 22 are called autosomes. So if there are any mutations on the genes or sitting on the chromosome 1 to 22, they are called autosomes, and it can be dominant or recessive. I will explain what is that in few minutes. And the genes located on the sex chromosomes are called X-linked or Y-linked. And there is also a DNA in the mitochondria, and there are multifactorial inheritance where the genes and the environment play a vital role. So now just look at the autosomal dominant inheritance. This means these are two pairs of genes on the two chromosomes, and the father has a muted gene in one of the chromosomes and the other gene on the other chromosome is normal. Remember, these chromosome pairs, we get one from the father, one from the mother. Like that, when you give it to your children, you give one to one child and one to another child, like that. So both can't go into the same child. So you have to give one and your partner has to give one. So here the father has one muted gene, and this mutation is enough to express a disease. So if one mutation is enough to express a disease, that is called dominant, and it is sitting on the chromosome 1 to 22, so it is called autosomal. So autosomal dominant means it is sitting on the autosome and one gene mutation is enough to express a disease. So each affected person has to have an affected parent. It occurs in all generations. Males and females will be equally affected, and there is 50% risk of transmitting in every pregnancy. So if you look at a pedigree, you can see the red ones are the affected members in the family. All generations will have an affected member. And if there is an affected parent, they will have affected children. But there is only a 50% chance that it can be affected because they have a normal gene. So if they send the normal gene, the baby will not be affected. If they send the problem gene, the baby can be affected. But there are two important aspects you have to remember in autosomal dominant inheritance. There is a concept called variable penetrance and variable expressivity. Variable penetrance means even though the gene has gone through the individual, it is not necessary that they should express it as a disease. And even if they express it as a disease, the symptoms can be very mild to severe. So, this is called variable penetrance and variable expressivity. There is another concept called anticipation, where when the disease travels down through generation, the disease severity becomes more and more. So, this is called anticipation. So, these are all the characteristics of autosomal dominant inheritance. And when you see a family with dominant inheritance, it is mandatory to examine all the family members very thoroughly, because they can have only subtle differences expressing the autosomal dominant disease. And so you might miss that the parent is having evidence of the autosomal dominant disorder. So, unless you do a very thorough examination and you have this concept in mind. Autosomal recessive disorders, here both the parents have to be carriers, whereas in dominant, only one parent has one mutated gene, whereas here in autosomal recessive, you have to have both parents as carriers. Carriers means they have one muted gene, both of them have one muted and one normal gene, but they don't have any disease. But they have the risk of transmitting it to the offspring. So this is called autosomal recessive disorder. So when the father is a carrier and the mother is carrier, there is 25% chance in every pregnancy they can have a sick child, and they have 50% chance of having carrier children and 25% chance of having normal children. And these disorders are never seen through all generations. Suddenly it appears in one generation. So if I talk to a consanguineous couple and say this is genetic, they will say, என்னங்க, in our family so many people are married as relatives, nobody has got the disease, and you are telling that it is running in the family. So we have to sit and put diagrams and explain how this happens. So if the parents are having carrier status, that is one gene is normal and one gene is having a muted gene. So what happens? This is how the genes segregate. Either you send a normal gene or you send a muted gene. So if both the parents send the muted gene, then only the child will be affected. And here in this example, both parents have the same genetic variation in the gene, and they are called heterozygous, because homo means both and hetero means only one. So I think some mic is on. Can you all mute your mics?
கவி பண்ணிட்டு வந்தா எப்பா சாமி நானும் உள்ள போக முடியாது இது என்ன
Ma'am, can you, you're not audible, ma'am. Can you just unmute yourself? What do you do? Ma'am, you got muted in between.
Yeah, from mid slide, I should go back now.
Autosomal recessive. Just after the autosomal recessive.
Here now, is it okay?
Yes, ma'am.
I'll start with the X-linked recessive.
Yeah.
Yeah, X-linked recessive, the females are usually carriers and only the males will have the disease. And if the female is a carrier, there is another X for her to compensate so they don't manifest the disease. And in the male, there is only one X and one Y. So if that X is mutated, they will manifest the disease. So a female carrier, 50% of her boys will be affected, 50% of her girls will be carriers. But if a father has hemophilia, all his daughters will be carriers because his X is mutated and he can give only one X to the daughter. So you can see here, this is a mother who has one mutated X, and this is a normal X. And when she gives the chromosomes to her children, 50% of her boys will be affected and 50% of her girls will be carriers. Whereas if the father is affected, he has one X and one Y. And so all his daughters will be carriers and they are called obligate carriers. Whereas the sons will be normal because the father gives only the Y chromosome to the sons. So Duchenne muscular dystrophy, hemophilia, they are all examples of X-linked recessive disorders. So how to test single gene disorders? If it is a point mutation of a known disorder and the gene is small, we do what is called Sanger sequencing. For example, thalassemia, it has only 3 exons and it is a small gene. And achondroplasia, we know there is only one mutation which causes achondroplasia. So we can do Sanger sequencing of that gene and identify. And if some disorders, deletion mutation is very common. For example, in Duchenne muscular dystrophy, spinal muscular atrophy, point mutations are not very common. If there is a deletion, we have to use a technique called MLPA. And if there are many genes involved in causing the disease, for example, if it's a cardiomyopathy, then we can do a panel or we can do next generation sequencing, which is called the exome sequencing, and it screens all the exons in the genome. So that is called the exome sequencing. And in high risk couple where there are consanguineous marriages, we do what is called carrier screening to find out if they are sharing some disease causing genes. So they are called carrier screening. So now coming on to the mitochondrial DNA, the mitochondria is an energy giving organelle inside the cell. So that also has a small strand of DNA, which is the house of 37 genes, and it codes for 13 proteins. So this is the egg of the mother, and this is the sperm. So you can see the sperm mitochondria is outside, and when the fusion happens, the mitochondria is left outside. So only the genetic material goes inside, and the sperm's mitochondria is left behind. So any mutation occurring in the maternal mitochondria only gets transmitted, and if there is a mutation in the paternal mitochondria, it never goes inside the embryo. That's very important. So when you see a mitochondrial inheritance, when the mother is affected, she transmits it faithfully to all the children. But when the father is affected, he doesn't transmit because the sperm's mitochondria is left behind and it never enters the embryo. This looks like an autosomal dominant inheritance, but when you look at the pedigree carefully, you can see fathers never transmit, mothers faithfully transmit to all. And also, this is called a bottleneck effect. So when the abnormal mitochondria goes inside the egg, the number of the abnormal mitochondria entering the egg may be variable. So it can be 80% abnormal, it can be 50% or 20% of abnormal mitochondria entering the egg. So depending upon the abnormal mitochondria, the disease severity will vary in the children. So when the affected father is there, unaffected children, because the sperm's mitochondria is left out, and when it is an affected mother, all the children are affected. This is the mitochondria. Sometimes can be controlled by the nuclear genes. So then it becomes like an autosomal recessive and rarely autosomal dominant. And mitochondrial disorders affect the whole body. There can be neurological disorders, liver disorders, reproductive kidney, skeletal muscle disorders, heart, cardiomyopathies, etc. So mitochondrial disorders are very important, and we need to understand whether it is a mitochondrial inheritance or a nuclear inheritance, and counsel the parents and test the parents accordingly. Now, moving on to multifactorial inheritance, these are conditions associated with effects on multiple genes in combination with lifestyle and environment. So, diabetes, hyperlipidemias, many psychiatric disorders, neural tube defects, all these things. So, there is no one causative genetic factor like you find in single gene disorder or chromosome. There are multiple factors which are interplaying along with environmental factors. And genetic test they use is the genome-wide association studies. So here they will look at the polymorphic variants. So the polymorphic variants are compared between cases and controls. And some variants are not that much present in the controls. So they become a significant variant. So if that variant is there, you have more risk of the disease manifesting in you. So it is not a diagnostic test. It is called a susceptibility understanding, and it is not diagnostic. So when you are found to be susceptible, you can have suitable lifestyle modifications. And this is called uniparental disomy. That means both alleles are coming from the same parent. For example, in one chromosome, for example, in chromosome 11, so one is from the father and one is from the mother. I am just taking a mouse and showing an example which has a normal growth. Whereas in this mouse, both the 11 chromosomes are coming from the mother. So the mouse growth is very small. And here both are coming from the father. And this mouse is very huge. So these are all leading to growth disorders. Uniparental disomy lead to growth disorders, like you have the Russell-Silver syndrome and Angelman syndrome, Prader-Willi syndrome. So these are all UPD disorders. So what happens actually? There is a trisomy. There is an excess chromosome non-disjunction happening in the zygote. Then the nature has its own way of correction. So this is called trisomy rescue. So one of the chromosomes is knocked off by nature. So if this is from the mother and these two are from the father, that is, if there is a paternal non-disjunction, this maternal chromosome gets knocked off. So both the chromosomes are from the father, the 15th chromosome, and there is no component from the mother. So this leads to what is called Angelman syndrome. So if the same thing happens with the maternal chromosome and the paternal is knocked off, you get Prader-Willi syndrome. So these are all called uniparental disomy. There are different investigations to identify these syndromes. You cannot do karyotype, you cannot do Sanger to identify all this. And then there is a group of disorders called imprinting disorders. And these imprints, as you can see, the somatic cells will have an imprint if it is a male, and females also have an imprint. So when they form the gametes, the imprints will be erased and new imprints will be formed. And among the imprints, one will be active and one will be inactive in the sperm and the oocyte. So whenever the primordial germ cells are formed, every time the parental imprint will be erased and the new imprints will be given, and one will be active and one will be inactive. So this is done by a center called imprinting center. So if the imprints fail to get applied onto the germ cells, then they lead to a lot of disorders. So these are all called imprinting disorders. So for example, this Angelman syndrome has so many different mechanisms. So Angelman syndrome can be because of a deletion in the maternal chromosome. It can be because of the UPD of the father, or it can be because of a mutation that happens in this gene, or it can be because of an imprinting center defect. So investigations have to be planned based on all these mechanisms. So that's why understanding the genetic mechanism of these disorders are very important to plan investigations. So the last is the triplet repeat disorders. I told you the genetic language is in 3-letter codons. So here you can see these 3-letter codons are getting repeated. So normally in genetic language, these are all like typographic error. A typist types big books and then there can be mistakes. So like that, there are insertion of these triplet codons unnecessarily. So normally 5 to 37 repeats is acceptable. And sometimes when there is 38 to 49 repeats, they become pre-mutation carriers. And when the repeats become very high, like more than 50 to 2000, they cause diseases. So triplet repeat disorders, typical examples are Fragile X, Huntington's disease, Friedreich's ataxia, myotonic dystrophy. They are all triplet repeat disorders, and we need specific genetic testing to identify these triplet repeats, and they cannot be identified by all the tests I have described so far. So to conclude, genetic disorders are heterogeneous. So we have to have a detailed history, anthropometry, family history with pedigree, detailed clinical examination, arrive at a diagnosis, and it is very essential to choose the right genetic test. So in the next few lectures, I will talk about history taking, how to draw pedigree, and then how to do what are the genetic tests that are available, and how to interpret the genetic tests, and also what are the treatable genetic disorders. And if any more topics are required, I'm happy to take. So journey into the genetic understanding will continue over the next few weeks. And thank you all for the patient hearing. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, ma'am, for an excellent presentation. I think if there are any questions, you can unmute yourself and you can ask ma'am directly.
Madam, I am Dr. Ravi.
Yes, sir.
So, are you doing this after knowing all these things? Are your center doing any genetic engineering, madam?
No, sir. No, sir.
it's
That requires a
diagnostic.
specific set of experts who have to work on that, sir.
Oh, thank you, madam.
It was a wonderful talk, Dr. Sujata, and you have
Thank you.
really stimulated our appetite to listen more. We were enriched today, and we hope the clinical applications, because we have several experts who are still in the dark how to use the material which is presented to them, like Dr. Bose initially said in the informal interactions we had. But most of the time, people come with already whole exome sequencing, and then so many variables which are of uncertain significance, and it becomes a maze to go through. So how do you intend to educate? I know already you have been educating several practitioners in this, especially obstetricians. Then through IAP, you are carrying forward this mission. So I think more awareness is required, first of all, in this area, because in MBBS curriculum, this is a taboo or a
Yes. Now people get scared when they think about genetics. I don't think there is anything to be scared, because there is no proper knowledge transfer, and there are no proper textbooks, no proper teachers. So it becomes a little scary, and it becomes a little untrodden path. So people are scared to venture into that. But then that doesn't prevent that surprises me. So when you are not that knowledgeable in understanding or interpreting the report, you should not be the one ordering the test. So I think there is a mistake that is happening.
Madam, Dr. Bose here. Thank you very much for enlightening
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
us on the basics, right?
Yes, sir.
And I'm sure that more of clinical applications will be talked about in the
Yes, sir.
next talks.
Sure,
But I
sure,
have
sir.
one small thing here, right?
Yes, sir.
See, whenever somebody comes and asks me like about this genetic testing, making them come to reality is always a big problem. So telling them then, like you could have one, and then you need to go through this. How do you tackle this particular problem? Like, how do you tackle this problem of making them realize the reality? Correct?
So that is what is called genetic counseling, sir. So that genetic counseling is again an art. So that comes by practice, and we have to draw a family pedigree, and then explain to them how genetic disorders happen, and then we have to draw illustrative diagrams, and it requires a lot of patience. So because it is all new information for them, so we have to take time, sir. I take about an hour or so for each patient. So it is really very time consuming, and you have to be patient, and there is no shortcut
Yeah.
for this.
Very true and well said. Only thing, implementing that is becoming a big problem, because when I talk about genetic counseling, they get so scared, They tell me that, we don't want to go through this. Why should we? Right. And then it becomes a big issue to counsel them for I agree with you, you have to take a long time. See, of course, as
Yeah,
clinicians,
because
we don't have a long time to talk with them, like 1 hour and all that.
refer to geneticist,
Yeah.
sir.
See, the only problem in referring to a geneticist, I would tell you, is not all geneticists
Yeah.
have a widespread knowledge about the practicality of the tests. So every time I refer to a geneticist, what happens is they don't have the clinical implications.
So they are
So,
meaning genetic counselors who are attached to
yeah,
the
correct.
labs.
Exactly.
So
The
genetic
genetic counselors.
counselors who are attached to the labs, they
Yeah.
have only the technical knowledge about the genetic
Exactly.
test.
Exactly.
They
Yeah.
don't have the clinical exposure.
Correct.
So you have to send to a clinical geneticist who has exposure to both the genetic technology and patient care. So
That is
genetic
right. But
counselors,
how
yeah,
many of
they
them are there? How many of them are there? Can you tell me? A
in
good clinical
in
geneticist.
Tamil Nadu there are about 7 or 8, sir.
Okay, right. Can you send them a list? Send me a list of that, because that will be
Yes, yes.
helpful for me.
Sure,
Thank
sir.
you very much. Nice of you. Right.
Sure, sir.
Ma'am, there are a few questions in the chat box. Would you like to take them, ma'am?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
No,
But
you,
how to
Dr.
access
Venkatesh,
the
you can
chat
read
box?
out.
Yes, ma'am. I'll read out the questions.
Yeah.
Dr. Bindu wanted to know what is Sanger sequencing.
Sanger sequencing is, I will explain. There is a session, there's going to be a session on genetic testing. I will explain in that session. But then it means sequencing that particular gene for spelling mistakes. That is what is called Sanger sequence. You sequence only one gene at a time.
There is another question, ma'am. What is the difference between gene and allele?
Gene
And
is the
allele.
segment of a DNA that codes for a particular protein. And allele are the 2 copies that are there on each chromosome. Each one is an allele.
Sir, Murli sir, any comments?
I think they have, somebody else has asked a question. What is the cardiomyopathy genetics?
Yeah, we will discuss. We will discuss.
Yeah, okay.
So there are a set of genes for dilated cardiomyopathy. There are a set of genes for restrictive. There are a set of genes for hypertrophic. So so that's why we will plan our further sessions depending upon what people want, and accordingly we can plan our sessions. I am planning to take one on genetic testing, so that we will know how to interpret the results and when to choose what test. So some sessions can be clinical, come laboratory oriented also.
To the audience,
Can we
this
do
is
whole genome sequencing in dead macerated baby? We have to collect the DNA, sir. We have to collect the DNA, and from the DNA we can do. And directly doing whole genome sequencing is very expensive proposition. So we can go whole exome, and then we can do a whole genome if we don't get an answer. And sometimes chromosomal microarray may be indicated if there are structural abnormalities in the baby. So depending upon what problems, that is always phenotype should precede the genotype. So phenotypically, you see what are the problems in the baby, and see we have a very big perinatal autopsy unit. And even in dead macerated babies, we can do an autopsy and then see inside whether the organ anatomy and all is preserved, or if there is any congenital anomaly. And depending on that, we can plan the genetic testing accordingly. And whole genome straight away may not be a good option in our population because it's too very expensive.
I have one unrelated question, or probably
Yes.
related as well. I was reading a book by Rousseau. He was talking about this is about a century-old philosopher. So he was talking about the South Indian kinship as the best kinship that creates stability in family relationship. That came as a surprise and shock, because as doctors, for us, consanguinity becomes a major issue. So when compared to the world, do we have consanguinity in India in general? Does it produce more genetic anomalies than when compared to what is its prevalence in the world?
Yes, sir. Definitely, sir. We have more single gene disorders when compared to non-consanguineous populations. And the carrier frequency for many of the disorders is quite high in our country, sir. because there has been a lot of inbreeding.
Thank you, ma'am.
I think
Madam,
Dr. has,
one question on a lighter note, Murali sir. Is there any gene to understand genetic diseases? Because most of us don't understand that. That it seems to be deleted in most of us.
No, sir, that's what I'm saying, sir. It's all quite simple. And because it has not been taught to us in medical curriculum, we have a sort of an inhibition or mental block. But I think after the next few sessions, you will all become pandits, sir.
Thank you, madam.
very similar to endocrinology. Actually, in MBBS, endocrinology is another no-touch subject. Very few people will really opt for endocrinology. Because people think somehow that these are esoteric, they are more at a molecular, cellular level. We are more comfortable at a macro level. But I think this is high time we sensitized the students that how you identify things which are slightly different from the normal so that you can proceed for. So again, coming back to before ordering the test, what you said rightly is identifying the phenotype.
Yes.
There many errors happen. Even
Yeah.
congenital hypothyroid itself is missed often
Yes.
with
Yes.
such telltale
So with
clinical features we are
with
missed.
all humility, I was only a trained pediatrician, and all the knowledge of genetics is my own hard work and learning only, sir. There was no teacher, there were no books when I started genetics, and there were no internet, nothing, sir. So it is all hard work and then understanding. So when I can do, I think everybody can do, sir.
Madam, one more question is there any transfer of genetic material happening between the cells in during either a disease state or during a healing state?
No. Whenever there is meiosis, sir, only in meiotic cell division, there is crossover and there will be transfer of genetic material, sir. But in other situations, there is no crossing over, sir. Only in meiotic divisions, there is a genetic crossover, sir.
Because what I have read is that stem cells transfer the genetic material also. They transfer the cytoplasmic material as well as the genetic material to the diseased cell. So I think I will talk about that when I have got a chance.
Yes. Sir. So because they introduce the enzyme or whatever the genetic code into the virus. See, for example, there are viral replicant cells that are there and the virus replicates and then this genetic material becomes more in that population of the newly forming cells. And so the genetic error is corrected that way. But then it doesn't transmit it inside there is no genetic transfer into the cells. So only gene therapy and all is it possible?
Like mRNA, miRNA. So these.
So in gene therapy, it is possible, sir.
Okay, thank you.
They are more for silencing or activating the genetic code.
Yes.
Whatever you're talking about mRNAs or silencing RNAs. Yeah. It's a big topic. I think Dr. Sujata
That is separate.
dedicated one full session for that.
So for therapy, we can talk, sir. Gene therapy, how are they all planned and then how are they useful, each sort of therapy. I can give some sort of an overview and principles because talking about them itself is a very big topic.
I think you should devote one talk to epigenetics also, which is a very big topic.
Sure.
Ma'am, is there what is
what Dr. Ravi is mentioning about stem cells is mostly on epigenetics also. Once you because the stem cells will definitely liberate some factors, growth factors and all. Which may favorably influence the disease cell. So it may be called epigenetic.
Yeah.
Exosomes and certain material which can be taken up by the disease cell. So I will just
that is different. That is different.
Yes.
Ma'am, I have one other question. Mosaicism and chimerism, are they one and the same or they are very different?
Good evening, madam. I'm Murugesh.
No, sir, they are different, sir.
Yes, Dr. Murugesh.
Yes, sir. Good evening.
Chimerism comes after a transplant, sir. Chimerism, there are two cell lines. They don't belong to that particular embryo. per se. There are two cell lines, that is chimera. Whereas the mosaicism is error in the somatic division and you have two populations of cells. Yes, sir, Dr. Murugesh. Yes.
Good evening, madam. It was
Good
a
evening.
nice presentation and
Thank you. Thank you.
good grounding on the basics.
Yes.
Ma'am, since I'm from microbiology with my background, in bacterial bacterial genomic analysis, all those bacterial PCR, we have just moved to the next generation sequencing, and Sanger sequencing has been completely it's obsolete.
Yeah.
In human genomics, we still have to follow Sanger sequencing, is it?
So that's what, sir, next generation sequencing, that's what the application, sir. When you have a thalassemia patient, you don't do next generation sequencing. That's what I'm saying. So when you want to look at only the thalassemia gene, you can still do a Sanger and be done with it. You need not
All
do a
right.
next generation sequencing to identify thalassemia.
That's fine because the
Yeah.
radio nucleotide activity in others in UK in bacteriology we have completely moved to this Oxford nanopore, and then they now have mini and all this next generation sequencing, which is error prone, like you say, it's not accurate.
Yeah.
But that I get
In
you.
next
Yeah,
generation
that's fine.
sequencing, you are bound to have variants of unknown significance, and the classification of the variant can be pathogenic, likely pathogenic, benign, variant of unknown significance. So all these classifications can come. Whereas in Sanger, you are sequencing only one gene. So you know whether there is a mutation or not. So even if you do a next generation sequencing, you have to confirm it with Sanger, sir. That is what is in
All right.
human genetics. So
Thank
because
you, madam.
next generation sequencing sequences all genes at one go. So
Yeah.
there can be an allele drop in, drop out. So these are all some technical things that can happen in next generation sequencing. So always we have to back it up with the Sanger sequencing, sir.
Thank you. Yeah.
Again, one more question has been asked, but I think that's also therapeutics. Bilateral blindness, retinitis pigmentosa prevention.
Yeah. So I think all that comes under genetic counseling and treatment of genetic disorders.
To all the audience, this is the first of a series of lecture. So all your concerns regarding gene therapy and genetic counseling and the type of testing, all that madam will be soon giving her extensive lectures on this in subsequent sessions. This is
Yes.
lecture 1 of the series. This is for your information.
God willing, we may hold a symposium on this with multiple speakers in Tanjavur Medical College with Sujata's patronage.
Sure. We can have genetics on different specialties, Dr. Murali. So cardiac genetics, neurology genetics, like that we can have if people are interested.
Don't forget nephrology, madam.
Nephrology, yeah, each specialty, dermatology, everything, sir. Everything. So many things are there to speak in each disorder. So reproductive genetics, so everything we can have specific topics also. We can have a small case discussion and then CME and then some illustrative examples. And we can have one person from that specialty and I can be there. And we can discuss some case scenarios and how genetics played a role in the management of those patients. So even endocrinology. So everything we can have a genetic case illustration with the implications of genetic testing. So we can do a series like that also.
To kindle interest, you can resurrect your picture quiz and case quiz, which you used to post in our science forum, and then the case conference group every Thursday. So we may restart so that some youngsters may be stimulated.
Okay.
That's a good suggestion, sir, because
if I don't get answers, then I get a little put off. I started posting, but then if I don't get answers.
Rest assured, Dr. Neelakantan and me will be there to answer.
Madam, but identifying, having this library of facial similarities, detecting a
Hmm.
particular, those things we came to know only after you started posting, madam. So,
Yeah.
so even if we don't answer you, we are getting some
Yeah.
information out of it.
Okay.
Madam,
no,
as
I feel-
surgeons, you have to
Yeah.
understand that we know very little of genetics, right? And for us to understand, you have made it very clear in this. And
Yes.
I'm sure that this is a very extensive topic, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And we are sometimes really puzzled by so many confusions which happen in our
Yes.
testing, especially the BRCA one, correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
So after Angelina Jolie, this has become a very big problem for us to tackle, right? So we are facing a lot of problems in genetics in oncology, right? So I'm happy that you are giving extensive talk on this, but don't get disheartened when we don't reply because we don't understand, right? Thank you.
There are
Dr.
no
Sujata,
further-
I am
Yes.
Muthukumar.
Yes, sir.
Hello. Yes,
Yes, sir.
I am Muthukumar. I'm not an. I'm an academic and a researcher.
Yes, sir.
I would like to tell you that you being self-learned, but you gave such a wonderful overview, which
Yes.
I don't think we have done in class properly. It was very
Thank you.
clear and it was comprehensive. So thank
Thank
you
you,
very
sir.
much.
Thank
And
you.
I'll
Thank you.
be. I look forward for the further lectures from you.
Thank
Wish
you
you
so
all the
much,
best.
sir.
I'll wait
Thank
for
you.
you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
If there are no further questions or comments, can we call it
Yeah.
a day, ma'am?
Okay, sir. Thank you very much, all of you.
Sure. Murli sir, do you have any closing comments, sir? Sir, Murli sir? Thanks, sir.
As I said, we look forward to more such sessions, and this has been a very good curtain raiser for information on genetics. And thank you, Dr. Sujata, for taking time
Thank you.
out. And, we are not going to leave you unless you
Definitely.
complete the-
Definitely. Yeah,
complete the
definitely.
presentation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure, sure. Thank you so
Thank-
much. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all. Yeah.
Thank you
Madam.
all. Thank you so much for being part of the. This will be uploaded in the TMC YouTube, TMC Medalog
Okay.
site. So for
Okay.
later viewing, I expect most of you to log in and take a look at it later if you have missed the online session. Thank you so much.
Thank
and
you,
Thank you.
Venkatesh. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank
Thanks
you.
a
all.
Good night. Good night,
lot,
everyone.
sir. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night. Good night.